Hello and welcome to a special edition of the State of the Fleet Industry video series produced by Automotive Fleet magazine, which puts a spotlight on key leaders in today's fleet management industry. And today I have the honor to interview Alex Yurchenko, as Senior Vice President, Data Science for Black Book, and who's going to talk to us today about the current state of the wholesale used vehicle market. So with that, I'd like to thank you, Alex, for joining us.
Thank you, Mike.
Well, let's get right into it. How would you assess today's market? I guess things are going really good. Would you second that?
In terms of prices, yes, wholesale prices are through the roof. We are at this record level, whatever metaphor you want to use, but the inventory is limited. So we on both sides, new inventory due to chip shortage is shrinking every day. Dealers feel it, OEMs feeling it. And on the used side, you have limited inventory because rental companies are not returning vehicles. There's not a lot of repossessions going back to the market. And we're starting to see some softening in lease returns as retail sales start to go down because of the chip shortage. So it's, whether it's good or bad depends on who you ask.
The shortage of inventory definitely helps boost prices. The lease returns, you can't help but sympathize with people because they turn in that lease car, they may have trouble finding a replacement car. So a lot of times they'll extend that. And then finally, if you think of the new cars of today being the used cars of tomorrow, that definitely seems like we're going to be having a shortage in the future, in which I guess if you're selling in that market, that's good news.
And that's what we are projecting, that we'll have limited inventory going forward for the next several years, and it's going to help prices stay definitely above pre-COVID levels. We're not going to be at record levels as we are today, but prices will come down a little bit. There is we already seen a softening started for the last 3 weeks. Prices been going down. Mainly due to, I guess, softening of demand, that the consumers are not as eager to buy used vehicles right now as they were 5 weeks ago.
Okay, why do you think that softening of demand is taking place? Any theories?
Prices are just way too high,
right.
And the consumers are being cautious. And I'm not sure if there's research about it, but there are anecdotal evidence of that. Consumers are aware now that prices are high. Usually when you buy a car, you compare to what's on the market and you make a decision. Now consumers have that information that we at record high, that prices are much higher than they were 2-3 years ago. So they're postponing that purchase a little bit. So we see the softening of that consumer demand.
Well, and that softening started as early as mid-June. That's when we started seeing a deceleration in the growth of used car prices. And that's what really got a lot of people wondering, are we approaching the peak? And if some people are being turned off on buying a used car because it's too expensive, maybe we are approaching the peak on that. What's your opinion?
It seems that we did reach the peak somewhere, I think, at the end of June, and prices are starting to come down. But again, we're so high, we don't expect any collapse in prices. Prices are just they got to sort of seasonal decline, but prices are still very strong.
Exactly. I mean, we may see the prices declining now, but if we were to go back in time 2 years ago and say we would get this price for this vehicle, people would be ecstatic. We're calling it a decline, but in a normal market, that would be a very strong resale value.
Yeah, we hit the ceiling. We had number of cars on the used market hitting original MSRP and above. So there's just no way to grow further.
Yeah, and when you say you're the second person that I've spoken to today, has been talking about this extending forward for a couple of years, and and when you think about it, you kind of see the merit in that logic, how that would be happening.
So we are a lot of sources of inventory are going to be much lower in the future. Rental companies are still not being able to get the inventory. So those vehicles are not going to be coming back to the market in a year and a half. We've started to see reduction in retail sales, including lease sales. So those lease cars are not going to be coming back in 3 years, and it's all because of a chip shortage.
Mm,
There is a real shortage of new inventory right now, and it's going to
yeah.
show up, and it's going to show up in prices in 2 to 3 years on the used market.
Yeah, what about in terms of specific segments out there? I mean, if you were to categorize the segments, which segments are having the strongest residual values? Which are the weakest?
So SUVs and trucks are still overperforming sedans and cars, but this year we've seen a much stronger growth in prices for those sedans, and it's all because of the inventory. There's a lot of manufacturers are not producing new sedans,
Hmm.
and we have a shortage of used inventory coming back to the market. So those compact midsize sedans were overperforming market this year. Um, Similar with minivans, there are not a lot of choices on the new side, and people were with all the travel, domestic travel, minivans became very popular on the used side. So the prices were used prices were overperforming the overall market.
Hmm. Yeah, I could definitely see that. And I always thought, the demise of the sedan was kind of overblown. I mean, it is decreasing, but there'll always be a core market for that vehicle out there. And as inventory starts to match up with demand, I think it's going to continue to remain strong. And but the important point that you brought up is there a good alternative when you can't find the trucks, SUVs, and so on that are constrained?
Yeah, we've seen that that prices of sedans been increasing for the last 3 to 4 years when the inventory levels became much lower.
Hmm.
So the prices were increasing pre-pandemic, but through the last 6 months, those sedans just became very hot commodity.
And if we see this constraint continuing for the next several years and so on, that's going to be coinciding as we start seeing more EVs entering the marketplace. What's your thought about how the EVs are going to do in the used vehicle market?
The volume, even if you look at new sales, the volume is still relatively low, and
Hmm.
it's going to take time for new sales to to get to some meaningful to we're still projecting. We're on a little bit of conservative side. We're projecting the overall sales to reach maybe 15% of market share for electric vehicles by the end of this decade. So it's still relatively small market, and it is even smaller on the used side. It's we're still looking about 3-4 years for those the Bolts and Leafs and Volkswagens to come back, ID4 to come back to the market. There's
Hmm.
still, I think the main issue right now is lack of demand for those used vehicles. We need to create that demand.
I totally
Uh,
agree.
we as an industry, we have incentives on the new vehicles. There are no incentives on used electric vehicles, either from manufacturers or government agencies. So there's still the demand for those vehicles is weak,
Right.
and we need to start increasing it if we want the residual value to increase, and if we want to sell those vehicles down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And where the incentives might be needed is on the used vehicle side. And, that's where it probably have the greatest impact. So that's excellent. We touched upon what's going to be going on in the wholesale market for the balance of 21 calendar year 2022. Um, so you're feeling bullish then? It's still going to remain relatively strong, so to speak, maybe not at the same peak levels as in 2021, but historical levels, it's strong. Am I categorizing that correctly?
Yeah, we are projecting that the market is going to be strong, as you said, not as strong as in June, but it's still going to be a strong market. The timing or I guess greater decline depends on the chip shortage. Once the manufacturers start producing cars, on a normal level, we'll most likely see increases in the incentives, and that will put pressure on used prices. But it's still, it's still months away, and probably somewhere into 2022. But we don't see any dramatic drops in prices. It's a gradual.
Mhm.
It's going to be a soft landing over a
Yeah.
period of probably years.
Yeah, so from the standpoint of our readers of fleet managers remarketing vehicles, that's actually very good news. It's a promising future. And but unfortunately, we've reached our allotted time. I mean, this was an excellent conversation and it just flew by. I'd like to thank you for participating. We'll have to do it again because it's a dynamic used vehicle market. What we're saying today might not be true 3-4 months from now. So thank you for joining us, and I appreciate it, Alex.
Thank you for having me.